the baseline that things are compared to, or the implied baseline? It's actually in the first line there. Anybody? Just answer. Just tell me. Or I'll have to, whatever. What's the starting point? What's the base? What's the reference point? Maybe the reference point is.
The reference point is.
I'm not entirely sure what you're asking about. Batul beRov, is that the?
How about that first line there? Chaticha she'eina ruya.
Right. So basically,
the whole.
So now you're giving me what you give me the requirements. But I was just going to say, it's kind of fine. We know this. We know the halacha because it's the inverse of chaticha ruya l'hikabed, and chaticha ruya l'hikabed should be an outlier. It's a Purim. My Purim hasn't stopped. This is like a Purim idea. We base a chaticha. A regular chaticha is defined as being she'ein ruya l'hikabed. It's a funny definition of normalcy. Yes.
I have two thoughts on that, Rav Manas. I'm just kind of curious what you think. One is that that could just be an artifact of the order the Torah goes in, right? Chaticha ruya l'hikabed came earlier, so it's something we know about already. Right? It has nothing to do with any fact of nature.
Yeah, but the quick response to that is, why did they choose that order?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a very fair point. And well, that's the other question, is that maybe the stam case is ruya l'hikabed, right? That most cases you have of yavesh yavesh, they're pieces of meat, right? They're steak that you serve to somebody that is.
I also think a potential answer is that's the way that the Gemara defines the term, right? You don't even need to go into the Torah's ordering system, but already based on the Gemara, it's a negative definition as to what we're talking about.
And by the way, at this point, yeah, you're right. Both of you are. What's the definition? What's the definition again? Defined it for me. No.
Something that is yavesh beyavesh, but is not ra'ui l'hikabed and not a birya, is beRov.
Is batul beRov. All right. So I wanted to point out the Purim nature of this whole thing. But I think you're right. But the other idea that Joel you had is that most foods are birya.
I think
most foods are ruya l'hikabed. Where you been eating?
Really good steak, apparently. So.
Evidently. Okay, thanks. The first thing I wanted to discuss. Now let's go into this. Help me with this definition here. Yavesh b'yavesh. I'm sorry. Be'acheros yavesh b'yavesh. Afilu chad b'trei. Wait a second. What are we looking at? Let's go to the Shulchan Aruch. I want to do this in the Shulchan Aruch, not in the Torah. I mean, we may make references. So Kuf Tet in the Shulchan Aruch. This is what we got here. Yeah. The Shulchan Aruch has min b'mina yavesh b'yavesh. Okay. And what would be the case of chaticha sheru'uya l'hikabed in this situation? Josh, what would be the case?
לא בטל.
לא בטל? אפילו באלף. Because it's the nature of the what? It's the nature of the sheru'uya l'hikabed. It's the nature of the matter itself. In this case, chaticha, let's call it, let's give it an English term, regular chaticha, okay? Would there be a Hebrew term for that we should use it? When you were thinking that to yourself, Reb Nachum, what term did you use? Or did you always go back to say, chaticha she'eina ruya l'hikabed? What term did you think in your mind?
Well, you're asking me if
We
I'm
actually have a
questioning.
term. Yeah.
No, the term is, I learned from another rabbi, scraps. Although I don't 100% agree with it,
Yeah.
but
No, I
scraps.
think what you have to say, chaticha really.
I think it
Yeah.
is. Like, I think it goes like after what Joel was saying. I actually don't know this is necessarily like the normal chaticha. Like when I think of a piece or like a slice of something, I think of like a significant-ish sized thing, right? That's the whole idea. Like when we say reality kabed, it doesn't have to be fancy. Like we generally define it as like it's large enough that it could be like an entree. Like it could be a burger, you know? It's like these are scraps. This couldn't be an entree.
I mean, scraps is a helpful term.
You can have a full burger size. Is not necessary. Is it only dependent on size? Is that the only thing we're going for? Going back to what is ruya kabed, not ruya kabed? How about a pretty weak burger?
Or a raw. Remember, there's different opinions. If it's raw, maybe it's not really chabed. Maybe if it's still needs work to be done to it. It's not really. It doesn't have to be a scrap.
Right.
Could be something big.
Okay. Well, when we're defining, so therefore it's already defined for us when it's the case of sharuya lahid kabed. Talking about the base or the bar. Anyway, what the reference point? Excuse me, the reference point. In the reference point, does it make much a difference if it's min b'mina or yavesh b'yavesh? To say that it's in a batul or fil be'elef? In other words, it's language right here. If you transpose it back, you retrofit it to the reference point, which is that special, a special chaticha sheruya lahikabed. Does the mean b'mina yavesh b'yavesh distinctions mean much? So Yavni, you're shaking your head saying what?
I think no. I think it doesn't matter. If it's be'eleit kabed, then it's never batal, regardless of whether it's
right. It's really defined on itself. It's a self-definition. Here, the reference, here, when it's a regular chaticha, I'm going to use my term. I'm thinking a regular chaticha, okay? A regular chaticha, the whole question depends on its interaction. What's it going to be interacting with? And here, min b'mina yavesh b'yavesh. In that case, and is there a way of qualifying min b'mina? I've been qualifying things here. Is there a way of qualifying min b'mina yavesh b'yavesh? What type of circumstances are those of the interaction? What kind of interaction do you call an interaction with a regular chaticha interacting with the axray, with other regular chatichot, right? But they're min b'mina yavesh b'yavesh. What kind of quality are those terms? I got poor in me, it seems.
It's just a loss of knowledge of where they come from. Right? It's an
Yeah, say that
it's
one
not
more
an
time. Say it again. Start again. Say it again.
You lose the knowledge of where it comes from or what it is.
Uh-huh.
They don't interact with each other in a noten tam kind of way.
Yeah.
They're indistinguishable.
Let's do each one. Min b'mina is what kind of quality?
You're confused. They look the same.
They're the same. So it's normal. This normalcy in this case, in which it's just the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yavesh b'yavesh. What kind of quality is yavesh b'yavesh?
It doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't fuse together.
It doesn't fuse together. Lach belach is the one that's obviously being compared to, right? Lach belach is all about, I don't know if the word is fusing, but interpenetration.
Right. Here they're just like they're distinct entities that we just don't recognize it, right? The problem is that it's mixed up, not that it's actually like mixed together, Dafka.
Right, okay, so it's not as it says here, Hainu Sha'ain Nivlau.
Well, it could be.
Turns out when you think about it in terms of what the quality is, it's not Nivlau. Nivlau is really, I think, isn't Nivlau Lach Belach kind of situation?
Well, it could be like
it doesn't have to be lach. At least one part is lach. At least one part is lach.
I mean, we sometimes have.
Say nothing?
Yeah, I want to say sometimes we have mixtures that have aspects of both lach belach and yavish b'yavish, like a goulash, where we have pieces in the goulash that even though that are yavish b'yavish in their relationship to each other, but the fact that they're cooking means it's also a lach belach situation.
Right.
And
comparatively, I'm going to help me with that. Comparatively, what is lach? Then, since here we have lach b'yavesh potential, lach b'lach is what quality then? Does it go back to Joel's fusing, or is it called something else? What do you got, Joel?
Well, I was going to say I wanted to reference the shach, but
No, not only reference the shach. Read the shach.
Read the shach. Oh, I stepped myself into that. All right, let's. No, I'll do it. This is Dalit, Sif Katan Dalit in the shach. I think it's Dalit.
Okay.
Ve'isur omed be'atzmo. Right. This is based on the Hainu comment.
Mm-hmm.
This is Ela shehu me'arav im acharim. Aval pi shehu mevushal b'mayim o mashkim acharim mikrei yavesh. This is the Beit Yosef and the Tvat Chatat and so forth. Right, and he says, "V'chen muchach b'shas mihu shita b'mvushal tzarich shishim ben hachatichot ve'amayim neged ha'isur ela de'afilu yesh shishim din hachatichot ke'avesh debatel beRov v'im ein b'chatichot rov kol hachatichot asurot afal pi yesh shishim v'kal levim v'chen muchach b'shas u'poskim."
All right, so explain what you get from here.
So he's got a case where you have a bunch of pieces of whatever these we call them scrap meat. Whatever it is, right? They've all been cooked together. There's with all the cooking juices and the water and all that stuff, you have 60 to be mevatel the pieces, not the pieces, the flavor that came from that one asur piece. So we've got the flavor, which is the lach part essentially. And then you have the pieces, though, remember in a normal case, you'd have to just throw out if you can recognize that piece, right? Here you can't recognize it, so you have to throw out that piece. Here it says, well, let's say you can't do that, you don't recognize it. If it's beRov, you can, the pieces themselves are the asur pieces batel beRov, and its tam is batel b'shishim, right? And so there's like a nice kind of balance of those two things, and so you could actually imagine a case.
A balance between what? Say it again. A balance.
Or not balance is two factors, right? That you need both.
Two factors.
You need to be batel the flavor in 60, and you need to batel the piece itself in rov, right? And here you have both cases going on at once of lach belach and yavesh be'yavesh at the same time.
Okay, so when you are mevatel, go forward with your thing. When you're mevatel, the taste, the tam, you are getting rid of normally what you consider to be the isur, or our problem with the isur, because you're about, the problematic impact of the isur. Then you said you have to also be mevatel, which we do by rov, by what's given by number. Why do we have to do that?
Well, there's still a piece of isur sitting there.
Because what?
There's a piece of isur sitting there still.
There's a piece of meat sitting there, and then we have. Then we have, which way do you think it worked? Did it work that they started with the shear, and we have Axray, Rabim, Lahatos, and we'll see, and if we don't see it, it's just good to say it now, and it's not a matter of suffix, it's a matter of Gezeras HaKosub, although you can start talking about that, Axray, Rabim, Lahatos, and we are nullifying the thing itself. Why not just throw it out? Joel says we can't find it. So therefore we use this Gezeras HaKosov. If we have a Gezeras, I'm just doing that the opposite order. Fine, so if we just got rid of it, why would we give it more? No, but it still has, they have tam there, and therefore we have to nullify it. And what kind of numbers do we need there? Kamut would be kamut, right? Well, how much kamut do we need there? Joel?
Oh, 60.
You need 60 because it's a problem of time.
Mhm.
So the two things being talked about is the existence of the aspect of the, the existence of the foreign enemy element there, and its very existence, and the rov gets rid of it by אחרי, רבים, להטות, and it's as if it doesn't exist. And the shishim that you're going to be talking about is, hey, it tastes funny, it tastes like Isur, etc. And then we get rid of that. There's an easy way, which is 60. Now, as we learn it this way, unless someone's going to disagree with it, and you can disagree in a moment, we learn it this way, it becomes, I think, for me, thinking about it, very interesting, because I think a lot of times when we were referencing rov and referencing shishim, and many times I think we might have thought of connecting them. In other words, that rov is okay, so we can do 1 out of 3. But the truth is, we have another way of doing rov, and that rov is 60, must be whatever. I think we had confusion about it. At least I had confusion sometimes about it. And then when I look carefully here in this thing, is that they're really talking, and I'm sorry, ad nauseum, I'll repeat, they're really talking about two different factors. There's a factor of existence and chad betray, אחרי רבים להטות, we get rid of it. And there's a factor of time. Time, you're being very serious. Well, maybe you could offer it up to a goy to taste it, non-Jew, excuse me, to taste it, but that's not always convenient or possible, etc. And the Shulchan Aruch says, here's a good way, shishi. But they're two, it's a double track system. And you might all have figured that out, but I didn't really, somehow didn't fully see it, and I saw it here. Objections or support?
I agree with you, Rabbi. I sort of always viewed shishim as like the higher measure, especially because, well, I guess this might be sort of an objection, but I'm not sure, is that like, at least, Daaorייתא, some things are batel beRov, but the Rabbanan it's shishim. They're actually drawn as equivalencies, right? There it's like clear that like shishim is not necessarily taking on taste, but it's taking on a higher measure of bitul on beRov. So that might be a slight challenge. But when I read the shach, where I was sort of thrown was like, oh, yavesh v'yavesh batel beRov, that's a great kula, right? But here it's taken as a chumrah in many ways, where we couldn't just say shishim, but you need shishim plus.
Okay, great. Listen, I think actually, how can I say it? I think the posting themselves use it in different ways, and might not use them in all ways. The notion of shishim, and there's different connections. But here we got this way of doing it. So therefore, I guess what I'm trying to say right now is, yes, the whole notion of shishim may be and rov may be sometimes on one track, depends who's speaking in what situation. But here it's 2 tracks. And okay, so we just did that shach.
I think this came up in other cases also, where like in the tam pogem, where we said like you could have we're not worried about the taste at all, so have as much, but still if it turns out to be the majority, then that's still a separate issue comes in and stops us.
Very good, Dylan, that's very helpful. Thank you, that's helpful. I may be able to use it later. Anybody else? Okay, so this part of the Hagah, this is phrase, Isur omed ba'atzmo. the ha'isur omed ba'atzmo. That term, who can explain that term? Ha'isur omed ba'atzmo. Or what's the other
I think that
term? Ha'isur omed ba'atzmo.
as opposed, that's his way of explaining what yavesh be'yavesh means. That
Exactly.
It's an independent object as opposed to nivlal, which is lach b'lach.
And therefore, you can say, based on what you just said, but mashkiach or whoever, I mean, it's soaking with some of the stuff from the other. No, it's still Isur Omed B'Yasma. That's what Yavesh means. So Yavesh doesn't mean, what doesn't, Yavesh does not mean, blank,
Not lach. Not
Excuse me?
lach.
Yeah.
Yavesh does mean not lach.
Or cuter, Yavesh does not mean dry. It's Yavesh does not mean dry. Yavesh means it stands on its own. Yeah, stands on its own. So I think that's what's helpful here. Yeah. Now, 1 second. Chabetre Bitul. And let's look at just Shach Vav. Chabetre Bitul, K'lomar beRov. כדכתיב אחרי רבים להטות ואפילו beRov אלא בהנח תרי שהם קטנים מהאיסור ביטול. He's pointing something out. What's he pointing out here? I'm going to read it again. כלומר, chabetre bitul, כלומר beRov, כדכתיב אחרי רבים להטות, ואפילו beRov אלא בהנח תרי שהם קטנים מהאיסור ביטול. What's the havamina he's going against?
He's saying that it's the issue of rov is your count. It's by count. It's not by mass. So even if most of the stuff, even if the isur one is very big and the heter ones are small, although you have to be unsure about that because you have to not know which one is the isur one. But even if it could be that the isur one is very
well,
big,
they're lost. So when they're kind of lost in there, right? So they're lost in space. I mean, they're kind of lost. So.
Right. It's something if you could identify it, if you could say like, oh, that big. Anyway, yeah.
Well, this is the stuff that the Achronim talk a lot about. Is that how? Let's talk about it now. How small can the two be? Or they can't be smaller than what? I mean, like, what's the limitation?
I think there's a machloket of the Achronim about whether any two-sized pieces beats out the one big piece, and that's the definition of chabetre. Or you can have two individually smaller pieces than one big piece, but they need to at least equal the size of the big piece. Equal
or slightly bigger? That's my focus too.
I imagine there are people who say both.
Yeah, right. No, yeah, because you can see that. Because again, it's keeping the true tracks. What's the argument that even if they're small, as it were, that it's okay? In other words, you brought that up, Noam. You said even if they're small. So what's the argument to say that the two will?
Yeah, chabetre is not. Is this what Yavni said? Chabetre is not about mass. It's not about weight. It's not about size. It's about
that
number.
Keeps our double track. Right? That works. Except that if they're really small and somehow we're not getting to the right mass, some people get very nervous.
On the other hand, like I don't know. I think it makes perfect sense to not care about the size to the extent that, like, obviously also it can't be such a massive discrepancy, because if there's like one piece that's like substantively larger than the others, like probably you would also be able to recognize it. in a lot of cases. Like this is the whole yavesh b'yavesh thing is premised on this idea of like these are separate entities and I just can't recognize which is the isser and remove it. So like provided they're probably within like not a crazy discrepancy in size to say that like, yeah, like the mass isn't working against each other. Like this isn't like shishim where this is like a like shear of igud tam, you know, it's the idea that like I have this many things and there is like this much chance that each of these things could be the isser entity and things like that, which that doesn't matter how big each of the pieces is.
Well, here's a problem that can be a problem. That's very good. Thank you. So I'll ask you all though. Let me say, when it said chad betray, right? What chad betray batul? What possible machmir? I'm just saying machmir in terms of impact, not machmir in any sort of other derogatory meaning. But when it says chad betray, what can that potentially tell us about the relationship of the two to the one? What would be the strictest definition of chad betray? And I say this, a lot of posts can go like that. What would be a strict definition?
You need twice as much.
Couple, that's the term used. I mean twice, as you said, couple. The chad betray is couple, as opposed to what we just talked about before earlier, that we just need אחרי רבים, and that that's part of Rabbi, and you have numbers. We don't care, how much it is in this Senate of the United States, Wyoming, and Montana, they count as much as New York City, which, by the way, according to the latest news, will soon be like Wyoming and Montana could be, but that's besides the point. I'm still informed here. But yeah, it could be dafka that. If you hold chad betray, and the most extreme would be double, what would be the most articulated mako of chad betray, of not being kufel, but meaning two entities. But in terms of mass, what would be then their mass? What would be filibuster proof? Okay, but what would be the least that you need? Least? Yeah, the least. Well, least is the wrong term, but what could be a least amount that would be incorporated here? If the most amount you're saying is it has to be kufel, what could be that it's not kufel?
It has to be half? Could you read it that way?
Excuse me?
It has to be half? Could you read it? Like not half of the total, half of the isel.
Most of the achronim, not most, all the achronim I've seen, who said that it can't be equal. It has to be like at least 51%. It has to be 51%. So if you guys can help me with that, that's fine. But equal, they say no. All the posts can say, this is what I said, what did I say? Kafachayim. So in the Kafachayim, and he says, all the posts can say that it has to be at least 51, which means.
Wait, when you say 51, don't you mean 101?
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. 101.
I mean,
and what's that percentage?
Meaning you want it to be double, 50% of an entity is not double that entity, right? You need 101% of something for it to be bigger.
51% of the total, not
percent.
of the
101%, not 101%.
Right.
100.00001%. Yes. It's more than. Yeah.
I didn't do too well in math. So where are we now? What have we agreed on? All you guys.
You need to have slightly more of heter substance than isser substance.
Right. So therefore, if you go in that direction and not kufel dafka, then what you say is that the strong leader in all this is אחרי רבים, but we can't have an absurd situation in which the mass of the Isur is going to be equal to the, I'm putting in the word absurd, because they evidently see it's naturally absurd. You got to think about it and tell me what it's going to be. Okay, we did a good job in that. Okay, now, okay. Let's go into now who's eating it. We just talked about the Isur, basically. Now we're going to talk about the ochel. Not the food. You know, people, the eaters, eater or eaters. What would be the simplest way to have this eaten that we don't have feelings of repulsion regarding the fact that it seems like there's an Isur there and somebody's eating an Isur. So what would be the simplest way to assuage and calm down your tender stomach? I know something about a tender stomach. What would be the easiest way of assuaging and calming down the stomach?
You leave one piece sitting there.
Even easier than that.
Give it all to a goy.
Well, that's a liberal statement, except you called a non-Jew by a name. But you catch what I'm, no, I understand you, Alexi. No, the easiest, I think, the easiest is have two people eat it. Because you have two people eat it. The concern, I don't think I was joking really fully. I was joking. But my joke was true. I was joking about saying an uneasy stomach, the reluctance to eat something not kosher. If you sit there and eat it with another person, oh, Lexi, you're right. You sit there and eat it with a Gentile. You split the pottage or whatever the food is. So forgive me, Lexi, I think you're actually right. You sit and eat it. You don't have to give it away. You share your meal with the Gentile. And by sharing the meal with the Gentile, you can say, somebody ate the Isur, and who ate the Isur? The Gentile ate the Isur. It's all a matter of deflection in these.
It's also just like there's this whole hierarchy, right? It's like really complex how many different steps of exactly what the different like options are of like how you can eat it, how an individual can eat it, how like multiple can eat it, whether they can eat it at all. And it just feels like people's articulation of how comfortable or uncomfortable with the concept they are, right? Like you have the Rosh on the one extreme who's like, this is literally fine. You can eat all of it. Like it's permitted. Eat all of it at once. Like that's okay. You have like the Rambam who's like, no, you literally need shishim for this to be like permitted, like durabanan. And then like, I don't know, I think especially the distinction between whether you have to give another piece to a goy versus another Jew is a big distinction of like, how much do I still interact with this as Isser, right? Like me still giving it to a goy means there's some like meaningful part in which I really do kind of still feel like there's Isser here. And so that's why I have to like say I'm giving the Isser thing to the goy, right? Whereas when I'm sharing with another Jew, there's some part of me that can't really describe it as Isser because I can't say I'm feeding another Jew Isser. Right? You know, so it's like all these kind of just like the spectrum of how comfortable or uncomfortable I am with the situation.
So what I want to say is, first of all, you just gave this part of the share. Thank you very much. And it's a matter of which part you wanted to deflect, from you and put it somewhere else. So a piece falling into the sea, right, doesn't hurt anybody. And but the question is, I'm just repeating you, Lex, to what degree can you believe this? Having lunch with the non-Jew and she or he eats it, it's fantastic because you can think in that direction. But I want to say additionally that in doing all this, it's not just a mental exercise, which it definitely is, therefore being a halachic exercise. How do we understand Bitul, which in this case, Bitul means where do you put the Isur? I'm trying to add something new here. It's not just Bitul in the sense of it's no longer here, or halachically we don't give it any credence. It's kind of like geography, you know, who's got the cheese, or who has my cheese, who has my Easter. And you say they have the Easter. But here I want to, maybe makabel that, not makabel that. And one more thing, it feels like a ritual in some cases. Throwing a piece into the sea, giving a piece to a non-Jew, or or selling it, or whatever. In all those cases, it feels, either you say it's magic, or I'll say it's a ritual. It's all based on halachic logic, but one needs something so that your stomach doesn't turn. It takes tremendous, you have to be a tremendous mommy to feel, if you just say, I'll eat it.
You want a clear
And
conscience.
as I eat it, I'll say, I'll even eat the three together. It's Bitul. I have that kind of emunah. That takes a lot of emunah, or you have to be one of the mathematical nerds here that I see in this group, and say, doesn't, and then, okay. And then I'm repeating, Lexi, or you say each one, look, I'm just having a piece. The rest I don't care about. I'm just having a piece, the rest I don't care. Third, just having maybe we ate it the first time. Oops, the halachic oops. Sometimes I used to drive Rabbi Soloveitchik from Washington Heights to the airport. I had wheels for a while. And and there was a big pothole in Manhattan on 189th anyway. And we bounced up and down. And what did he say? He said, oops. I don't know, it cracked me up. I couldn't stop laughing until he told me to stop laughing. I thought you'd hear something else, but said oops. But here's an oops. You have your third piece. We go, oops, maybe it was in the first one. Well, that was then. That was then. So I think I'm believing that all these are ways. These are ways of deflecting it, getting rid of it. I like the throwing into the sea. I like, because again, it seems like a sacrificial element going on there. It feels like a rite, R-I-T-E. As opposed, if you eat all three together, I have the right, R-I-G-H-T, to eat these all together. Okay, this is the end of this piece. And my question is, what have we missed in the conversation? Any possibilities that we didn't come up with? One, we have the denial, we have the loss, the throwing it away. Okay. Maybe we got it there.
Did we mention?
So therefore, no, I didn't give my therefore then. Therefore, I says it feels like a right, R-I-T-E, or a right is, I think that doing being allowed to have your dinner seems to be a halachic concern of the rabbis. And to get over the problems, you have to have a halachic logic, but evidently it's not always sufficient. And the act of throwing a piece of meat and say, as you throw it and determining it, or the act of you're sitting next to your friend who's not Jewish and say, do you enjoy it? You enjoy eating the treif, is what you're really saying. It brings some form of resolution to a problematic situation, which is someone might be eating something non-kosher. Now, and I say that because I feel a lot of times that when I just had I get shilas. So the rabbi used to get a lot more shilas. I get shilas. So when you tell someone that you can eat what the mistake they made, but they still can eat it, if there's an act that allows them to not appropriate, to mollify themselves in that. So let's say regarding, I have to think of another situation. Let's say it was the pot was not in the same day. Therefore, there's an asinus tamlet gam. All right, that sounds a lot for people. If you tell the person afterwards, yes, you can eat it and all the rest, but make sure that this pot, you wash it out, and actually you should do hagala, in it. It's very satisfying. It's actually, I'm going to tell you this, secret of the rabbinate, okay? It's actually more satisfying than by saying no problem and leaving it there. People have to feel, food is very personal, very ritual, very, all those things. Food has that stuff, and actually people want to do something. You can, by giving them the right psak, but also allowing them to do tshuva in some way. I always would say it then too, and don't do it again. Oh, no. But, when I would tell them to do something, they would say, yes, I've been telling people that you are actually quite religious, Rabbi Hullin. They feel good about it, not just about me, but they're feeling good about themselves. Okay, I just said a lot here, but I think that's it. So right now, we're going to go to we did the first section, we did the second section. Let's take a break and we'll come back in 5 minutes and we'll go to the third section. There's 3 sections here, okay? Fine, thank you. Well, one thing we didn't talk about, I want to go back for a moment. I want some of you guys to come back on. Okay, very good. Let's talk about Yavesh b'Yavesh. What's the easiest case of Yavesh b'Yavesh? Yavne, where are you? Come back. Okay, there he is. What's the easiest case of Yavesh b'Yavesh? I mean, the easiest case for us to discuss of Yavesh b'Yavesh. Have we got an idea? Josh, you got an idea? Lex, you got an idea?
3 meatballs.
3 what?
3 meatballs.
3 meatballs, but easier than that. You could go with that.
When I was going over this,
the meatballs my Bubby, may she rest in peace, made were definitely homemade b'fnei atzma, without a doubt. Okay, so
the example my friend and I came up with.
Eggs that are not broken. Okay, but you're right, meatballs would work too. Eggs that are not broken. Eggs that are yotze me'aklaf, from the, it says that have left the shell. What do we do with that? What do we say about the chelbon? The chelbon is very liquidy, and it goes everywhere. So the chelbon.
You're talking about raw eggs.
They're not created cooked.
It's a fair point. It's okay.
So, do you still make dishes that have raw eggs in it, or did you give that up?
I gave that up.
Yeah, but not for Jewish reasons, right?
Yeah.
But not for Jewish reasons. Okay. So no. So and what's the halacha with the chalmon, the yolk? That's all maybe b'fnei atzma. So the chalmon is considered liquid. It's lach, and the chalmon in general, all these are in general. The chalmon in general is considered to be our favorite term, yavish. Lexi, what do you got? You're playing with your cat?
Yeah, my cat keeps trying to.
Okay.
That was not a hand.
Okay. So that's that case. What about kemach bekemach? We didn't talk about that.
That's considered min b'shein omino.
Well, it's lach b'lach.
Yeah, sorry, lach b'lach rather. Yes.
Lach b'lach, no, but there are shitas that say that if you need b'shas adchak plus tzorach gadol, or I don't know what the difference between the two, plus tzorach gadol, you can say but it has to have tzorach gadol. You could say that. That is it. But normally referred to as lach b'lach. What about sesame seeds? Where would you go there? Lach b'lach or yavesh b'yavesh?
Sounds like lach b'lach to me.
Yeah, most posts can go there lach b'lach. So you gotta get your act together on this one and figure out all the different things. And there's enough achronim that will have this list. Okay. So what else did I want to say about that? I think that's pretty good. Okay, earlier on, אחרי רבים להטות. Would you please comment on that, Rabbi Danzig?
Oh, well, Lexi mentioned that the source for it is in Rashi, and she's quite right. In other words, there's no Gemara that says that we learn from אחרי רבים להטות to kashrut topics. There is a Gemara that talks about it for like Beit Din. For Beit Din, that we go by the majority opinion, but is that a general rule in the whole Torah? So that's one way of understanding it. It's a general rule in the whole Torah, and therefore it's sort of the same limud from the Beit Din we can use for food, for kashrus issues. But that's it's not explicitly said in the Gemara. The only one explicitly says it, on the daf is Rashi in two places. One in Beitza, Amud Gimel, Daf Gimel, and Gemara in Hullin, which I sent to the chat, Tzadichet, where he uses the idea of Achre Rab Lahatot to be the source for the Torah concept of Rov being Bitul for Yavish. But the Gemara definitely assumes it in Hullin. Even if without Rashi, the Gemara definitely assumes there is a Torah concept of Bitul beRov. The source is not given in the Gemara. I think. Yeah,
so this is the Kubal.
It's obvious. I think it's obvious that it's Machre Rab Nahatot because no other alternative.
Okay, great. Now you had a second comment.
A second comment was just to read the Pitkei Tshuva, which mentions that there was this one Chacham who thought that when the Shach says that when you have two against one, the two needs to be bigger than the two ones, even if each one is smaller than the Isser, it would still be okay as long as together they're bigger than the Isser.
Okay.
Now that's the way I explained it, but this Chacham understood it wrongly, and he thought that the Shach meant even if the two together are smaller, but you have numerical superiority, since there's two, that we mutter. And he quotes a certain posek, I forget who, says that chacham is totally wrong. That's not what the shach means. The shach means the two for sure have to be on their mass larger. And he used a funny turn of a phrase. He says not only b'minyan do they have to be bigger, but also b'binyan. Minyan meaning number and binyan meaning mass.
Yeah, it's a famous comment. Yeah, this is that. Well, having said that, let's go to the.
Wait, Joel
going
wants to say
back a little
something.
bit.
I just want to
I'm going
say, I wrote a note here. This is from 2 years ago. Is it the Beit Yehuda who says that the mass is not relevant? Is that who it is?
Who says it?
I wrote down. I need to look at the Beit Yehuda says that, but I don't remember.
Yes, it's the Beitza Yehuda. It's the Beitza Yehuda. Yeah, you can check it to Rabbi. I think it's good.
Yeah, Beit Yehuda says. Well, you don't have to write it down. It's written in the Pitzei Tshuva, Beit Yehuda.
Oh, I could have just.
Siman Pei.
We're doing well today. But let's look for a moment at the Gra Daled, where we began. Gra Chad Betray. Okay, Chad Betray. And Asher, read this. Hator. Yeah, Daled in the Gra. Beor HaGra.
Okay. Hator lishnet Gemara digitin nun Daled bet.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Aval, give me a more aval.
Okay. אבל באמת אין צורך אלא רובה, כמו שכתוב במקומות הנ"ל. וכן וגיטין שם כתב רש"י משום דכתיב אחרי רבים וכולי, וכן בכמה מקומות בש"ס.
Okay, that's good. So, what's the difference between chad betray and ruba?
Chad betray is 1 and 3. Rubo is just a simple majority.
Okay. But he says ruba.
Right, but right, he's well, right. He's saying you don't need the chad betray, he just needs rubo. Ruba is what the Quran is saying.
Which would imply what? It goes back to a conversation we had. What do you have, Lexi? You have something on this? No?
Well, the interesting question is, what if you have 1 against 1?
Not the interesting question. I gave a question already. Let me get.
Right, I mean, that is okay. That's what you're saying about when mass would matter, right? That theoretically, if you had 2 pieces and 1, but also like, again, how do you know in that case, right? Because if you know which one is the nevela, then you can just take it out. And if you don't know, then how do you know which is the bigger one?
Yeah, I mean, I think the ground might make sense in a case where
no, it's very simple. It's very simple. You don't know which one it is. Sorry.
Yeah. You don't know which one it is. Go. I want somebody to get. Yeah, go ahead. Go.
I'm saying you don't know which one it is. I'm related to what Lex is saying. You don't know which one it is. And it might be the bigger one, and it might not. But even in the worst case that it's the bigger one, there's still the 2 smaller ones are larger together than the bigger one. So that's how I can have a doubt. I don't know which
is that word rov mean larger? Excuse me. Is the Gra saying rov means larger? I didn't write it. He wrote it.
No, but I was just related to what Lexi was saying is how could you ever have a case where you have bigger and smaller ones?
Fine. Let's go back now to the Gra.
I think the Gra.
What's the difference between chad betray? But actually, what you only need is rov. I mean, that's what's written here.
Well, I mean, he could be talking about a case where there's more than where there's like 2 treif pieces and 3 kosher pieces. That's one way to read the Gra, I think. And the other way is that he is actually talking about mass. And he says, if it's, or volume, let's say, right, that it's, if you have, I can never remember volumes, right? If you have like, 3 ounces of treif and 3 + 1 ounces, and it doesn't matter the number of pieces, you could always chop pieces up anyway.
Yeah, I think rov means, I like what you said. I would say probably a little different. That one against 2, you're assuming that the 2, the Gra, I think is saying is these are actually 2 real pieces. two real pieces. But if it was one piece, that's usher, plus another piece that is mutter, plus a real scrap that is so minuscule, you might not refer to it as a part of the tray, but it'd still be a row. Chad betray seems to, I'll try to say it so more understandable. Chad betray seems to include that the tray are two real trays, are two real pieces, while rov could be one piece. That's how I understand. Rov can be one real piece that is mutter, plus another little tiny something or other that's floating around that's mutter. That still gives you a rov. I'm willing to take a different explanation, but I don't see a different explanation.
Why can't achad betray be understood to be double? And he's saying you don't need to have double, you just need to have rov. In other words, chad betray.
Go back to our other conversation.
In other words, exactly, chad betray could mean 1 and 2 versus 2 and 4, or 3 and 6. And he's saying you don't need 3 and 6. You need, 3 against 6. You need, it could be even not 3 against 6, 3 out of 9. But it could even be 3 against 3, 3 against 4.
Okay, good. Okay, very good. Okay, we're doing well. Okay, so now I have to do just with you maybe some reading. I didn't want to read today at all, but let's go to Seth Bet. We're going to the next deal. Okay, so good. No, read bets, please. Or you begin, I'll move somebody else in after a while.
Okay, yavesh beyavesh shenitbatel chad betray, im bishlan kulan ke'achad, afilu le'achol kol echad bifnei atzmo, asor im ein sham shishim, mipnei sha'arotev benoten tam, v'nivla b'chatichot.
Okay, tell us what this means.
Right. So if in a yavesh b'yavesh mixer that underwent bitul chad betray, but then after the bitul process occurred, you then cook them all together, right? Even if you were to eat each of the individual pieces by itself, that's actually forbidden unless you have shishim, because the rotev that it was sitting in conveyed tam to it, and the chatichot absorbed it. So
okay, so it's a very funnily written piece. So what's our? I think you have to start from the end in a certain sense from that piece. What's our worry?
Your worry is that your worry is that even though bitul occurred, like there's still some sort of isur presence. So this is like not like the roast. The roast would have no issue with this because of the gezer hakatuv. But for everyone else, it seems that like you're still worried that there might be some sort of isur. So the cooking process happens. The rotev that is in which the yavesh pieces are immersed have a negative flavor that came from that isur that was still there, and then transferred it to all the chatichot.
So I like what you said. I have no disagreement. Now I just kind of want to chop it up, so to speak, or just understand it. So there's the rush. It was very good you mentioned the rush. It was like a side comment. But the rush has decided to look at these issues in one way. And here we see that the mechaber is looking at things in a different way. So how do we categorize how the rush reacts to the situation? The rush would say, why would he say that? How do you feel? That feel is Goldstein's term. How do you see? How's he seeing things? How's he seeing things? The Rosh, and therefore then why is the Shulchan Aruch seeing things differently?
Right. The Rosh takes a very positivist approach, meaning if Bitul works, Bitul works. It doesn't really matter what like the constituents' feelings are. Like there's nothing, you don't have to be worried about it. But
but now you need to define positivistic.
Meaning the rules work, right? The rules of the system work regardless of any feeling that might be engendered by the application of those rules.
Right.
But the other Rishonim, and these are the ones that the Shulchan Aruch is following, say, well, actually, we do need to be concerned about that sense, right? And we do need to do something about it. So I actually think we can read like the Rosh versus other Rishonim in that ways, though I'm pretty confident that the other Rishonim would also posit, they are also positivists, right? They just have a different understanding of the way that the rules are operating. But outside of like the inner halachic concepts debate, I think that's what's happening from the outside. How do we relate to the person?
Okay. Of course, no one used the word positivistic for halacha until like 1962, but it's okay. I understand what you're saying. And when the first time I saw that and heard about that, I was actually very upset. But at 62, I was 12 years old. And that's when I heard it in a lecture. And but now I see it's true. I mean, in other words, if the halacha says something, as you said it earlier, that's what the halacha says. I don't care about your stomach. I don't care about your reaction, your instincts. And so I think that's and I think you're right. I think the other Rishonim would say, well, I think that's correct, Ever. But nonetheless, let's now say this in a more non-academic way. What would be more the halacha state, halacha says something, that's the halacha. And the other one would say, but we have a metzias. And the first opinion would say, the halacha state, we determine what the metzias is. Not just we determine what the halacha is, we determine what the metzias is. So I think that's an ongoing thing that actually halacha decisors, meaning all of you, when you pass smicha and people will be turning to you for sure. You have to decide, many times, what weight to give to them. And if you can accommodate both, it makes a lot of sense to accommodate both. Except when you have a shas adchak, etc., you may want to go only to a very formalistic, positivistic approach if it's going to give you a heter, because it often gives heter, like here it's giving heter. Nachum, what do you have? No, okay. We can't hear you.
I always think of these things as whether they're derabanan or deraita. And here we have a case that it's all derabanan, right? The Isser, even the argument is it's certainly mutter deraita according to everybody, because it's only min b'mino. So even if you cooked it, what are we worried? We're worried that you cook it and now it becomes like lach balach again, and there we have a derabanan gezerah that you have to have 60, even when it's min b'mino. So really the question is, what did the rabbis say? What did they include in their gezerah of min b'mino? They also include cases where there was already a bitul of yavish b'yavish. In other words, and so therefore, it could be either way. There's no real way to prove it because just however they conceived of their gezerah, we're not sure.
Okay. All right. Look, except in building a system, and I'm kind of going off, but I have a little time. In building a system, the drabanans become more than only a drabanan. Drabanan is really, here's the drabanan, they're all drabanans here. So here the drabanan, as you pointed out, here the drabanan it can't, it's only you catch what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't mean to say it's only Rabbanan. I just mean to say, how do the rabbis think about their laws when they make a gezerah? That's the question. It's not like an empirical reality that they are forced to conform to. It's just how do they think about it?
Yeah, they're making a system. I hear you. I mean, I hear you. But that becomes always my reaction. They're creating a system,
and they want to be
therefore
consistent.
they're giving chashivas to these rabbanans. All right, I didn't say anything more than I said. Okay, so this is what we did here. Okay, so let's go back.
I have a question. If you have, let's say, a case of raw meat, let's say you have some small non-haticha ruya litchabed, but let's say pieces of meat, hamburgers, let's say, and they're raw, and two of them are kosher, and one is treif, and you don't know which one. You don't want to eat them raw. How would you cook them?
Okay, what's the mitzvah again? You have two. You have
two kosher hamburgers.
Don't cook them all together.
So how would you cook them?
Separate pans or pots.
Separate pans. Now so you cook each one in a pan. Would the pans also? The pans would also.
It doesn't have to either be each one. It just has to be. They can't all be in one, right? It's the same idea as like I can't eat all of them simultaneously, according to everyone but the Rosh, right? It's just like I think the Rashba is the one. It's like you just need two pots or whatever.
Because then you just say like, oh, is in the other one.
Just say you have two pots, and then I'll have. But then one of the pots is for sure treif. No.
But it's not treif, because again, this is still a gzera, right? And so I'm still able to play the same kind of mind games that I play when I'm like eating it one at a time.
Rav Nachum, are you saying that like once you cook it, then it becomes la'o'alit kabed, and then it's a different issue? Is that the?
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the flavor starts transferring. Well.
But the pot itself becomes batel because you have other pots.
I have to have two more. Wouldn't I have to have two more to batel it? I'd have to have two kosher ones to batel.
Because they're already batel, right? And that's the whole idea is that like they're already batel when they were mixed together before.
Why can't I eat them? Why can't I eat them?
But if I cook them, it's going to, and that's like the Rosh thing, right? Is being like they're batel. It's now totally fine, right? But everybody else
is like the Rosh.
I know. So everybody else is saying that like, even if they were batel while they were raw, practically speaking, unless I'm eating raw meat, like I'm going to have to cook them.
So once you cook them,
I cook them in separate things.
But once I cook them, well, if I would cook them with other food and it wasn't 60, then it would all be treif. Well, now by itself, it also would be treif.
I think we should look at the shach yud bet.
Okay, Joel, read. Go.
I really need to stop doing this. All right. Ve'im rotzeh levashlan. Right. Miu levashlan b'shtei kderot share. Right. He's not only this isn't only his. Ve'afilu b'shalem b'shlam rather b'shtei kderot kodem shenodat harovet mutar leochlan achar kach. Share Rashba machmir k'shebishlan yachad afilu b'shlan achar shenodat harovet. Ve'tir b'bishel miksatam l'tzad echad miksatam l'tzad echad. כמו שכתב בית יוסף משמוע כאן לשונו. כאן לשונו שמיה הבח, ולפי עניית דעתי, דהד מתיר הרשב"א בבישלן בשתי קדרות, היינו משום דכיוון דנודע ונתבטל מן התורה, וגם מדרבנן ברוב, אלא לבשלן יחד אסור משום שחזר איסור ונתערב עם ההיתר, right? This is what we said. והרי הוא כשאר איסורים הנבללים כדכתיב הרשב"א להדיא, ואסור. As midirabanan. That's her as midirabanan rather. Hilchach kol shnit bashel b'shtei kderot delo chazar lior kishar isurim hanivlolim v'shas shochel kol kdera ukdera shnit bashel ba ani omer ha'isur b'kdera acheret mutar v'afilu tema demidi desfeka lo nafka mikol makom havele sfeka derabanan lekula v'efshar afilu sfeka derabanan leka v'efshar delogas rabanan min b'mino b'shishim ela belach mamash aval kishnit batel kvar beRov lo miru.
By the way, that last point is exactly what I was saying before about how we just don't know what their gezerah was of lach balach.
Really, repeat the line with emphasis and say what you're saying again.
He says the efshar, the second efshar, the efshar de lo gazru. There's the rabbis didn't make a gezerah. Lo gazru rabbanan min b'mino b'shishim when they said min b'mino, you need to have shishim, which is a gezerah. They only said they didn't say it. They only said ela b'lach mamash, except in a case where it's initially lach b'lach. Kishenit bashel kfar. But in our case, where it's already batel from some other because it was dry, beRov lo echmiru. They didn't make their gezerah there.
They did not make a gezerah that give a full sense.
They didn't make a gezerah in a case where it was batel beRov because it was dry, and then you cooked it. And
they didn't make the gezerah that
it would be usher. It would require 60. Right. But he did say, but Joel's quite right in pointing out the first part, which is the main point, that 2 pots would be mutter. But my question was, what about the pots? What the pots are also mutter? I guess so, because of the suffix derabanan on each pot. That's right. Why. Suffix derabanan on each pot. So we don't need rov with the pots. We just have a suffix derabanan. But it's kind of weird because one of the pots,
it's also a question of how you create a suffix.
Right.
If you say I'm eating kosher and the other one is not kosher, and then when you eat the other one, it already produces a suffix.
No, but you see, I don't understand. If you cook them separately, don't you lose your row? In other words, it's very weird what's going on. You cook one hamburger in one pot, one hamburger in the other pot. Now you've got a vada isser in one of the 2 pots.
So
how do you say it's Rabbanan? Say it's Da'oraytã.
You could cook one in the kitchen and cook one upstairs on the frying pan. As long as it's in the same house, it's enough.
No, but you're right. But if you look at each pot, one of them is for sure got the isser in it, and it's just Da'oraytã, right? It's 100% treif meat.
Do you think that's I thought he was imagining a case where there's like a lot of them and then one. But I think it's a good question if there's 3 and
If there's 3 and you cook each one separately and you can cook in the same pot. I mean, do you have to do it? Can you cook it in separate cooking intervals? I mean, the best solution is to have a grill. Have a mangal, and then you can throw it away, or you can burn it.
Wait, you're saying they have to have the kavanah while they're cooking? The kavanah is after the cooking, is in the eating.
No, I'm just saying it's sort of weird that we say that you can cook them separately. If you have 3, you're cooking one piece in a pan that may be treif, and it's just a suffix da'oraytã. It's not a suffix derabanan. Once you separated them out, you no longer have bitul, like you had a bitul beRov, but now you took them apart. So now you're cooking them. It's just a weird thing. To me,
you're going to have to take it up with the writer.
I would much prefer the opposite that you had to cook all 3 of them together. If I would say you have to cook all 3 of them together, then I would guarantee that I have at worst an issur derabanan. In other words, I have I don't even have that. In other words, I have 3, but once I separate them, I'm creating an issur da'oraytã.
You have a problem with Isra.
No, but the 3 are mixed.
What you could do is add more meat to the pot.
Oh, so that's the Eitzah of the mechaber, yeah.
That's the Eitzah of the mechaber. You can trust the mechaber, the religious man. So finish up the shach, please. Joel, finish the shach.
All right. He says, "Aval keshalono da'ataro." Because remember that all this was when we knew. He said maybe also when you don't know about it, but it only becomes batel when you know about the tarovet. So imagine you had the 3 pieces of meat mixed together, you cook them, and then you realize that you had some non-kosher meat in there. Aval keshalono da'atarovet, de'az lo nitbatel ha'isur klal, ve'asur min ha'torah. Ela de'ata b'shata bishul no da'atarovet. Im ken al kok de'ra yesh lomar shema isur bazo. Havi le'sfeka de'araita u'lechumra ve'asur lekule alma. There's no kind of comment. Sfeka kufyud aleph or Siman kufyud aleph. The shtei kedor shel adam echad mistarfim levatel b'shishim.
Okay, so let's now. Where are we now in the mechaber?
By the way, what Joel just read sort of tries to answer the question because he's saying that once the tarovet is known, so it doesn't matter that I separate them. all these pieces are mutter deraita. And so I don't have I don't recreate an Isser D'Oraita by cooking them separately, because their tarovet is known from the Torah's perspective. It's like the Sanhedrin Paskin, and they're all kosher. All three are just as kosher as each other.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, where are we in the Mechaber?
But in that case, okay.
What? No. In Rasol Bashar Yachad, Ben Shom Samach Mutter Laharbo Salayim Kadei Shir Shishim Lavashla Vein Boshum Bevatel Isur. That's just what we talked about. Haga, Lexi, read the Haga. Excuse me.
The Yeshamrim Imno Dat Haravet Kodem She Nitbashlu Biyachad Akol Shari Ein Chosrin Ben Asrin Machar Nitbashel Yavesh. Right, so that's
we already said it. Okay. Ubamakam, you right?
Yeah, Makam Hafzed Yesh Lismoch Adivra Mekilin Latir.
And why does he say that? Because it's already mutter. Yeah.
Right. Like he's like, Yesh Mashrulis Mochalev. Like he's like, even if he doesn't think that that's like he's not necessarily endorsing that as like what your lechatchila position should be, but he's like, no, basically acknowledging that there's like a legitimacy, certainly like a logical legitimacy to like the Rosh's argument of saying like it was batel. They're permitted.
Right. So now go to Ber Heitev, Zion, Nevatel. This is a nice little point. You shouldn't forget it. Let's see.
Okay. Kivan shekol echad mutar bifnei atzmo haran.
You have to lower your voice. Okay. Okay, Asur. Also Nevatel.
בשבת וביום טוב, אין לך תיקון גדול מזה, אבל מותר לשער בשישים, אפילו נתערב בערב שבת ולא נודע לו עד השבת.
So what's the case? Our case. So what do you mean?
So if these things got mixed, like Erev Shabbos, and I didn't realize what happened until it was Shabbos, when it says like l'sha'er b'shishim, right? Like because we talk about the fact that this isn't mevatel iser, right? Like that's what they're saying earlier. Like it's not, it doesn't fall under mevatel iser lechatchila. And so even though if I was doing actual bitul of an iser, I wouldn't be able to do that in Shabbos because that's like mamash like a tikkun of a thing that it wasn't edible and is now edible. It's like this doesn't count like that, so I can like make sure there's shishim keneged this thing on Shabbos.
I don't think so. I don't think that's what l'sha'er means. I think that l'sha'er, he's worried.
How do you read that?
There's a prohibition on Shabbat of measuring. And so he's worried that you might think that I can't measure, I can't find out if I have 60.
Right.
But you can't add. He's saying you can't add because that is tikkun. You couldn't add anymore. But what you could do is just find out if you actually already have 60.
No, you can just do you can eyeball it.
Well, l'sha'er, however you
eyeball. You know, the halacha mida is you take out something, you use your fingers or take out a ruler or whatever, but you do it that way. So that's important halacha. Okay, good. What did you say? What did you say at the end? What did you say? Mil yavesh b'yavesh. Did you read that?
If I hold by the whole, like I need to throw one away, which depends on who you hold by, I can do that on Shabbos because that's a chumrah. There's so many opinions that include me not having to throw one away. That's not like a mataken. Like I could eat it without doing that.
Yeah. So it kind of makes fun of the minhag, but does it a nice way. So I'll end with a story, which I didn't think until we just said this right now, because it's not connected, but everything's connected. So we had, where I lived my teenage years, we grew up in the south side of Chicago, and then we were part of the movement to integrate the south side of Chicago. Didn't work. last Orthodox family to move out, basically. So we went near north, and we lived off the lake, a very beautiful area. And we invited, I'll change her name, Nancy, was a Balas Shuva. There wasn't so many in those days. We invited Nancy for lunch, first day Pesach. And first day Pesach. And she asked, when do you throw the matzah out of the window? Now, a question like that, you can't just leave it. Got to find out where this is coming from. So she says, I thought this was a well-known custom. And said, where did you see it? I saw it last night. So the night before, she had had dinner, had Seder, with the chazan of the shul. This was an incredible chazan. He was what you call a Welt chazan. The whole world knew about him. He was like the Yosel Rosenblatt, the tone and the tenor, and the Chicago Lyric Opera wanted him to sing for them. And he did a special performance, but he wouldn't sing on Shabbos. You know, it's an interesting guy. And actually, he was an old Chabadnik, so old that he actually shaved. They didn't have beard. This is from the first crew in America. They didn't have to shave. So in any event, I didn't have to let their beard. They're allowed to shave. Anyway, so finally got the story. She's eating they're eating at the table, and she took her kiddush cup, and she spilled by mistake a little wine on the round handmade matzah, which was a big deal then. Round handmade matzah. The cantor's wife didn't say anything, but went to the window, opened the window. The chazan picked up the round matzah and frisbeed it out of the window. They lived on the 8th floor of these big apartment buildings, old-fashioned apartment buildings. 8th floor, frisbeed it out, closes it, not saying a word, because of course I didn't want to embarrass her at that. So I said, what happened next? He says, well, what happened next? You know, it got a little boring. I poured a little wine on I had these big, they had very strong wine. I poured a little wine, just a little bit on the matzah. The wife came, opened up the chazan take, frisbeed it out, and I said, what happened then? She said, they took all the matzah away from me. And that was it. So when do you throw the matzah out? And what's the source for throwing out the matzah? My father was very distinguished, said you did nothing wrong, but they had their own minhagim, and he kind of explained. And she said, knew I was studying in yeshiva, what do you say? And I say, it's actually written in the Haggadah. Shfoch chamotzcha al hagoyim. And that was it. Any of it. Wish everybody a good week. Excuse my Purim Torah. It was about Pesach. All good things. Nachum, what's up for next week?
Next week we'll do the next Siman, Kuf Yud. I'll send you out some sources. Look at a couple of Gemaras. And I think we're going to spend 2 weeks on Kuf Yud.
Yeah, Kuf Yud has some stuff. Yeshkach to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rob.
Thank you, Lenato.
Thank you.